No, I opened this. Yeah, it seems good. I'm going to present some results from the Coexist project, which was a European project that was ended last year, led by us at the IMR. Integration of fisheries and aquaculture in the coastal zone. Basic things that I will cover is the competing claims of the coastal zones in Europe, with a case study at Hardangerfjord, and especially it's a fjord study in Norway that we have worked especially on. I also will tell you something about the impact on diseases of aquaculture as a major constraint, and also as a major interaction between aquaculture and wild fisheries. Networks models for disease and spreading of pathogens, and improved management of space. Basic line is that the coastal zone is facing competing claims. Aquaculture is causing increased pressure globally. The aquaculture production is increasing globally. It's not increasing in the European Union. It's increasing in countries like associated with the Union, as Norway, Turkey, and Iceland. But it's not increasing in the European Union, which is dependent on import of seafood from Asia, in a situation with a growing population in Asia, growing economy in Asia, and more middle-class people tend to buy more fish. Fisheries are stagnant at best, has a lot of conflict with other users. Tourism is increasing, has conflict with other users. Wind farms and wave farms has an extreme growth potential, as we all know. And marine protected areas is also a way of utilizing area. The case studies of the Coexist project by the Hardangerfjord in Norway, the Atlantic Sea coast of Ireland and France, the Algarve coast of Portugal, the area around Ancona in Italy in the Adriatic Sea, coastal North Sea covering 3 countries, Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands, and a part of the Baltic Sea called the Archipelago Sea, which is the part between the Finnish mainland and the Åland archipelago, that part which is still, which is not a part of the Åland. This is one example of European aquaculture. It's from Algarve, close to the major city of Faro. It's traditional aquaculture. You see people digging for shell here. These areas are covered by the sea when the tide comes in. It's a traditional area. It's also an example of a cultural landscape, because these guys are actually maintaining the landscape and they are exploiting it. The economy is almost entirely black, making measures to change it difficult, but they're also very interested in changing and learning from other more industrial parts of our European aquaculture and fisheries. Like this is sprat fishing in the Hardangerfjord area. Otherwise, an area covered by large industrialized salmon farming. It's one of the densest salmon farming areas in the world. So a lot of various EU policy drivers are important. Integrated maritime policy, Water Framework Directive and Floods Directive, Marine Strategy Framework Directive, of course, integrated coastal zone management, and sectoral cross-cutting policies, energy, transport, regional policies, etc. So there are a lot of influence here, both from the policy side and from the industrial side. We were covering the aquaculture and fisheries especially, but also the impact of these two on other uses like energy, transport, tourism, environment, etc. Multicriteria analysis we used quite a lot. Most multicriteria analysis incorporate following steps. You define and structure the problem, identify relevant alternatives, objectives, identify scores for each alternative, identify weights, and compare results. You can look at an MCA matrix, or aggregating with the suitable MCA techniques, you get scores for different choices. We developed a framework for multi-objective, qualitative, and quantitative evaluation of marine spatial management in coastal zones. It was just published by Katrine Sumo et al. In the ICES Journal of Marine Sciences. The basic thing is that we identify relevant aspects of marine spatial management, and you end up with an evaluation of adaptation and proposing improvements to marine spatial management. I would like you to refer to the paper for further elaboration of this. We are ending up with a quite nice material of the different case studies that we worked with. So in an evaluation of spatial management tool, you assess the existing spatial management tools for each selected case study and propose improvements to those tools. There's a lot of improvements to be done on this area. I think it is wise to view spatial management as something that has to be very dynamic. Technology changes, the industries changes, the social impact and the social importance of the various activities changes, and even the landscape and the climate changes. So we have to be dynamic. We don't plan our coastline forever. We plan it, and that is a dynamic process. We analyzed conflicts and synergies between different activities here of aquaculture and fisheries, here of aquaculture and fisheries and other activities, and identified not only the conflicts, but just as important, some synergies that exist. There are synergies between various activities. For instance, the tourists are interested in seeing fishermen in activity. They might even be interested in aquaculture because actually it produces local food. You might even call it slow food. It's a part of a cultural landscape, just as agriculture has been for centuries. One major thing, however, with aquaculture, it has the impact of pathogens. Even though the pathogen reservoirs are in the wild organisms, there are no new diseases associated with aquaculture. However, pathogens can proliferate in aquaculture, and movement of cultured organisms can create vectors for pathogens. Disease is the most limiting factor in aquaculture. Direct impact is mortality, but it also influences the transmission and impact of the pathogens. Our coastal management practices influence how much disease there are. That's a major lesson learned from later years of research. We can change the management practices, especially in aquaculture, but also in other sectors, and it will influence how much diseases there are. We do know that those diseases that we observe are an integral part of nature. There's nothing unnatural about it. The pathogens are subject to evolution, as thus diseases are too. There is no such thing as a disease-free wild population. Absence of pathogen is a situation that only exists in an imaginary world of some environmental NGOs. Don't listen to them. Human behavior, however, affect proliferation and distribution of pathogens in the wild, so we should think. The lessons learned are always based on very expensive learning by disasters. Introductions of diseases, uncontrolled proliferations of diseases. You can take models from other systems and adapt them to aquaculture. This is the general model. You have a wild organisms with a lower density of hosts, persistence and a natural reservoir, exchanging pathogens with the farmed organisms, where you have aquaculture, the farmed organisms with a high host density, possible proliferation of pathogens, and enhancement of the virulence of the organisms. And then we humans introduce pathogens by migration of ballast water, or migration of wild organisms, or worse, transport of farmed organisms. Introducing pathogens to new area might introduce disasters. For example, if you took salmon from the Baltic Sea, which were adapted to Gyrodactylus salaris, transferred them to the west side of Scandinavia, where the salmon was not adapted to Gyrodactylus salaris, the result was massive mortality. Because Gyrodactylus salaris is a parasite endemic in the Baltic, but not present in the west side of Scandinavia until humans transported it. We have interconnectivity between farmed and wild stocks studied by this network models. You have integrated multi-trophic aquaculture, you have wild stocks, there are anthropogenic stock movements, finfish escapees, those are important, and hydrodynamic connectivity between the wild stocks and the various different kinds of the aquaculture. You have compartment-based models. I shall not go deeply into it, but the whole point is that the individual transcends through a series of states: susceptible, infected, potentially back to susceptible. You use these models also on humans. A lot of human epidemiology is based on this, and we can adapt that to aquaculture and fisheries management. There is a critical host carrying capacity, a threshold, N. How many susceptible individuals there are. In aquaculture, that can be manipulated. You can vaccinate individuals, thereby manipulating the critical threshold so you can have more individuals present. Network-based models take into the context between populations that actually do take place, movement of populations, people, equipment, and water, not the least. And we have models like this. Here we have a cage, here we have a farm, here there are between different farms in an area, and diseases are systematically moved between the farms. We can model how they work. The examples of tools that you can manipulate are distance between farms. That can be regulated. Maximum amount of animals per farm, following, restriction of movement of animals, etc. So in the general situation in Norway is that escapees and salmon loss are the limiting factors of the aquaculture industry. This is the Hardangerfjord, and this is the animal that limits the aquaculture. It's a salmon lice. Beautiful animal. This is the Hardangerfjord. Essentially, Bergen is up here. The fjord extends quite long into the country, and it has, as you see, those red dots are salmon farms. Lots of them. Even though there are not many fish per fish in the farms, there are so many fish farms that the amount of lice in the farms is large. So they produce a lot of salmon lice. And we have manipulated even the freshwater here because the hydrodynamics of the fjord has been altered. Earlier you had much freshwater in the fjords in the spring. Now there is much little fresh water because the hydroelectric power plants hold back the water. So there will be in the hotspot here. Now there are many meetings between salmon lice and salmon, whereas before there were few meetings between salmon lice and salmon. So I will finalize by using a spreading model. It's actually spreading data. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days after the spreading. This is actually the half size of a county. I think the Hordaland county is about half the size of the Latvian nation, so it's a large area, this. And as you see, the salmon lice is amazingly affecting and spreading, which means we have to synchronize what we do with the salmon lice, not in the farm, not even the neighboring farms, but at all farms on the size of a county. So we have revolutionized the management of the salmon lice. This animal is highly specialized, and management per farm is not sufficient. We have to do it on the level of municipalities or even counties. Synchronized treatments, mandatory synchronized prophylaxis, synchronized following, and an all-in, all-out principle. You don't allow them the pathogens to proliferate. We have produced a guideline for best practice in spatial planning to integrate fisheries, aquaculture, and further demands in European coastal zones. I'll be happy to distribute that to you. So, any spatial-based, this is my conclusions, and a spatial-based management system will require input from all relevant stakeholders. Okay?
Yeah, thank you. Wait a minute. There is still some time for questions. Do we have full questions? Because in principle, this is a quite important issue, I guess, the spread of pathogens. This is something that we also see in river estuaries. It might be even pathogens that are harmful for humans. We might have problems with coastal bathing, tourism, and stuff like this. So it's the same mechanism, a different story. But this, of course, also is another dimension, very specific maybe for MSP. But it plays a role. They are getting tired, you can see it, huh? They need lunch.
In general principle, I think it's important to adapt. There are some general principles here, and then there are some local principles because simply the nature in the Baltic is different. The Baltic is a different sea from the west side of the Atlantic. Here, nutrients play a large role. On the west side of the Atlantic, you can ignore that. Furthermore, what's happening in estuaries is a very different ecological systems, but still, the lesson learned is that you can manipulate the probability for disease by changing your management procedures. So there has to be a dialogue between those scientists working on disease spreading and actually the managers of aquaculture and other activities in the coastal zones, because management do influence how these things happen.
Thank you.